Knock volley gun, British, 18th century. Commissioned by the British Royal Navy around 1779, its creation is directly attributed to the renowned London-based gunmaker James Knock. The Navy, perpetually seeking an edge in close-quarters naval engagements, desperately needed a powerful anti-personnel weapon for boarding actions. The ideal was a single weapon that could unleash a devastating hail of shots, sweeping an enemy's deck and breaking their morale in a single moment. Knock's solution was a flintlock rifle featuring 7 individual barrels, typically ranging from .52 to .69 caliber, all clustered around a central breech. The design allowed for all 7 barrels to fire simultaneously from a single flintlock ignition system. The concept was simple: one pull of the trigger, a wide, devastating spread of 7 musket balls delivered. The theoretical tactical advantage against tightly packed boarding parties or hostile ship crews was undeniable. The reality, however, was a brutal lesson in physics. Firing all 7 rounds at once generated an immense recoil, a force estimated to be over 1,300 foot-pounds, comparable to being hit by a small cannonball. This concussive blow was so powerful that it could easily dislocate the shoulder of the user, shatter collarbones, or even send them tumbling from the precarious rigging of a ship, where these guns were often intended to be fired from. Contemporary accounts describe sailors having to brace themselves against a mast or rigging, sometimes even requiring a second person to assist in absorbing the shock just to attempt firing it. Compounding this peril, reloading was a slow and complex process. Each of the 7 barrels had to be meticulously loaded with powder and ball individually, a painstaking task on a pitching deck amidst the chaos of battle. This rendered the Knock gun effectively a one-shot, crippling weapon. Despite its terrifying potential to clear a deck, the Knock gun was quickly deemed far too dangerous for its own operators. Shoshat Automatic Rifle, CSRG 1915. The unprecedented and desperate demands of World War I, particularly the need for mobile, squad-level automatic firepower, led to some truly rushed and flawed firearm designs. Among the most infamous and widely derided is the French Fusil Mitrailleur Model 1915 CSRG, contemptuously known as the Shoshat. Designed primarily by Colonel Louis Shoshat and Charles Sutter, it held the distinction of being one of the very first widely issued light machine guns in the world, deployed in significant numbers. While revolutionary in its concept of providing sustained automatic fire to infantry squads, the Shoshat's execution was plagued by an array of design flaws exacerbated by a dire lack of manufacturing quality under wartime conditions. The weapon operated on a long recoil system, meaning the barrel and bolt recoiled together for the entire length of the cartridge. This made for a heavy, jerky, and unbalanced action, leading to poor accuracy and violent operation that made follow-up shots difficult. Its rate of fire, though technically high at around 250 rounds per minute, was rarely achieved in practice due to constant stoppages. However, the Shoshat's most notorious flaw was its distinctive crescent-shaped open-sided magazine. This design, intended to allow the shooter to visually monitor remaining ammunition, was a catastrophic failure in the brutal, debris-laden environment of the Western Front trenches. Mud, dirt, sand, and even rain could easily enter the exposed action through the magazine's large cutouts, causing constant jamming, misfeeds, and catastrophic malfunctions. Soldiers often resorted to wrapping the magazines in canvas or tape in an attempt to keep out the mud. Compounding these issues, the initial French 8mm Liebel version was already poorly manufactured with loose tolerances and weak springs, but the subsequent American variant, hastily converted to .306 ammunition, was even worse. This conversion suffered from improper barrel chambering and recoil springs that were too weak for the more powerful cartridge, leading to even greater unreliability. American Expeditionary Force troops, facing constant stoppages and frustrated by their abysmal performance under fire, famously and frequently discarded their Shoshats for more dependable captured German light machine guns like the MG-08/15. The Shoshat's infamous reputation as a jamming machine is entirely deserved, a critical failure of wartime expediency that cost lives and severely hampered combat effectiveness. Type 94 Nambu Pistol, Japanese World War II. During World War II, the Imperial Japanese Army issued a standard sidearm that stands out not just for its unique, somewhat antiquated appearance, but for its danger to its own users, the Type 94 Nambu pistol. Officially adopted in 1934, its overall design lineage is largely attributed to the Japanese arms designer General Kijiro Nambu, though this specific model might have been more a product of military specification under budget constraints than his personal preference. While other pistols designed by Nambu had their quirks, the Type 94 took unreliability and user danger to a whole new level. Its most flawed design element was a fully exposed sear bar located on the left side of the pistol's frame. This meant that if the pistol was cocked and a round chambered, a common practice for immediate readiness, any incidental pressure applied to this bar could cause the pistol to fire. This could happen from simply rubbing against it in a holster, setting the loaded pistol down on an uneven surface, or even gripping it too tightly in certain ways. This design effectively bypassed the trigger entirely, making carrying the Type 94 with a round in the chamber a lethal safety hazard. Beyond this critical flaw, the Type 94 suffered from numerous other practical deficiencies. It fired an underpowered 8mm Nambu cartridge, which was weaker and less effective than the 9mm Parabellum or .45 ACP rounds used by Allied pistols, offering meager stopping power. The pistol had an extremely awkward, almost vertical grip angle that was uncomfortable for many shooters and made natural point of aim difficult. Its tiny, almost useless sights further hindered accuracy, especially in combat situations. Compounding these issues, Type 94s, particularly those produced in the later stages of the war, suffered from declining manufacturing quality, with poor metallurgy, sloppy tolerances, and crude finishing. These deficiencies led to frequent mechanical failures and increased the risk of internal component failure. Gyrojet pistol, American 1960s. Conceived by MBA founders Robert Mainhart and Arthur Beale, the Gyrojet's core premise was revolutionary. It fired miniature, self-propelled rockets instead of traditional bullets, promising to eliminate recoil, simplify internal mechanisms, and achieve higher velocities. The principle behind the Gyrojet was that the projectile, a small rocket with angled vent holes to impart spin for stability, would accelerate after leaving the pistol's smoothbore barrel, reaching its maximum velocity at a certain distance from the firearm. This was its fundamental undoing. At close ranges, precisely where a pistol is primarily used, typically within 20 yards, the rockets were incredibly slow and therefore inaccurate. Their initial velocity upon exiting the barrel was so low, around 100 feet per second, slower than a thrown baseball, that they were easily affected by even slight wind, making precision shots at any practical distance impossible. A conventional .45 ACP pistol round, by contrast, reaches maximum velocity almost instantly. Furthermore, the unique rocket ammunition was complex and expensive to manufacture, making it a logistical nightmare. It was also highly sensitive to environmental conditions. Temperature and humidity significantly affected the propellant's burn rate, leading to unpredictable velocities and frequent misfires which could damage the pistol. Loading the Gyrojet's internal magazine was slow and cumbersome, and the gun itself offered consistently poor accuracy even at ideal ranges where the rocket had finally achieved full velocity. While an intriguing technological curiosity that found limited use with special forces, notably in Vietnam, where its quiet operation was a niche advantage, the Gyrojet proved to be impractical, unreliable, highly specialized, and ultimately ineffective as a general-issue combat sidearm. It served as a reminder that sometimes the most radical innovations fail to translate into practical superiority in the harsh realities of military application. Ross Rifle, Canadian World War I. The Ross rifle, specifically the Mark III variant, holds a unique and regrettable place in military history as the standard service rifle for Canadian forces at the beginning of World War I. Designed by Sir Charles Ross in Canada, it was initially praised for its accuracy in target shooting and its innovative straight-pull bolt action, which allowed for faster cycling and higher rates of fire than traditional turn-bolt designs like the British Lee Enfield. However, this very precision, intended as a strength, proved to be its undoing in the brutal conditions of trench warfare. The Ross rifle's finely machined bolt mechanism, particularly its locking lugs, were engineered with extremely tight tolerances. While this craftsmanship contributed to its accuracy in clean target ranges, it made the rifle susceptible to fouling. Even the slightest bit of mud, dust, unburnt propellant residue, or even just grit would cause the bolt to seize and jam. This prevented the extraction of spent cartridges or the proper chambering of new rounds, rendering the rifle useless in the heat of battle, leaving soldiers defenseless. Compounding this primary reliability issue, a critical and dangerous design flaw allowed the bolt to be inadvertently reassembled incorrectly after cleaning. If improperly put back together, the bolt would not lock fully into the receiver, yet the rifle could still be fired. When discharged under these conditions, the immense chamber pressure would send the bolt backwards, often striking the shooter in the face with lethal force, causing severe injury or even death, tragically earning it the nickname the Dead Man's Gun. The failures of the Ross rifle were evident at battles like the Second Ypres and the Somme, where Canadian soldiers, facing constant malfunctions under heavy fire, discarded their Ross rifles for captured German Mausers, or the British Lee Enfields found on the battlefield. This widespread abandonment forced a difficult decision. By 1916, the Canadian Expeditionary Force officially replaced the Ross rifle with the Lee Enfield, a humiliating but necessary admission of its failure. Colt revolving rifle, American, 19th century. In the mid-19th century, before the adoption of self-contained metallic cartridges, the American inventor Samuel Colt, whose name became synonymous with his successful revolving pistols, attempted to scale his revolver design into a long gun, the Colt revolving rifle. While representing an important early step towards multi-shot, repeating long arms, these rifles were plagued by a fundamental and dangerous flaw known as chain firing. Like its pistol counterparts, the rifle used a revolving cylinder manually loaded with loose black powder, a projectile, and a percussion cap for each chamber. The critical issue arose from the design. In a rifle, the shooter's non-firing supporting hand was placed forward on the forend, often directly in line with the cylinder gap, the small space between the rotating cylinder and the fixed barrel. The flash and hot gases from a fired chamber could often ignite adjacent chambers in the cylinder simultaneously, especially if the percussion caps were not perfectly sealed, or if powder residue accumulated. This event would send multiple projectiles and a torrent of hot gas and flame not just down the barrel, but out of the sides of the cylinder gap, directly into the supporting hand or forearm of the shooter. The results were often severe injuries, including severed fingers or hands and deep burns. Beyond the danger to the user, the Colt revolving rifle also suffered from the common drawbacks of black powder firearms: rapid fouling that caused the cylinder to bind, reduced reliability, and a relatively slow reloading process. While the U.S. Army did purchase a number for use by specialized units on the American frontier, where their repeating capability offered a tactical advantage over single-shot muskets, their dangers and limitations quickly became apparent. Mars automatic pistol, British, early 20th century. At the dawn of the 20th century, the race to develop reliable and powerful automatic pistols was intense. Among the most ambitious attempts was the British Mars automatic pistol. Designed by Hugh Gabbett Fairfax and patented in 1897, the Mars was an attempt to create a pistol that would fire powerful, bottlenecked cartridges. For a brief period, firing cartridges like the .45 Mars Long, it stood as the most powerful handgun in the world, with ballistic performances comparable to some rifle rounds. However, this raw power came at a cost in terms of user experience and mechanical reliability. The Mars pistol was notoriously difficult to shoot. Its recoil was severe, making follow-up shots nearly impossible. It produced a massive muzzle flash and a deafening report, making it highly disorienting. Its internal mechanism featured an incredibly complex, long-recoil rotating bolt system, which was prone to frequent malfunctions, parts breakage, and required a lot of cleaning. The process of extracting and chambering new rounds was so complicated that it often jammed. Perhaps its most alarming feature was its spent casing ejection. Unlike most firearms that eject casings to the side or up, the Mars pistol ejected spent cartridges forcefully straight backward from the breech, often striking the shooter directly in the face with significant velocity. Test shooters reportedly refused to fire it more than once due to its nature and the risk of injury. Due to its complexity, high cost, and unmanageable nature, very few Mars pistols were ever produced. Estimates range from only around 80 pistols before production ceased entirely in 1907. Winchester 1911 SL, the Widowmaker, American, early 20th century. In the early 20th century, the American Winchester Repeating Arms Company, a titan in the firearms industry, found itself in a predicament. They were unable to compete with the wildly successful Browning Auto 5 semi-automatic shotgun due to John Browning's ironclad patents. To circumvent these restrictions, Winchester commissioned their own chief firearms designer, T.C. Johnson, to develop an alternative. The result was the Winchester Model 1911 SL, a shotgun that quickly earned the grim and accurate moniker, the Widowmaker. The gun's most glaring flaw stemmed directly from its unique and very unsafe method of operation. Lacking any traditional charging handle or external bolt mechanism, to load the first round into the chamber or to clear a jam, the shooter was required to grasp the knurled section of the barrel with their hand and push it downwards into the receiver. This was typically done while resting the buttstock on the hip or the ground. This unconventional and unsafe method meant that users were routinely placing their hands and often their head directly over the muzzle of a loaded firearm. The inevitable consequence of this design was a horrifying frequency of accidental discharges. Users would slip, their hands would become cold or numb, the gun might fall, or simply a misjudgment in the force applied could lead to the shotgun firing while their hand or head was close to the barrel. These accidents frequently resulted in severe, often fatal, self-inflicted wounds. The Model 1911 SL's reputation for injuring or killing its owners led to its commercial failure and a relatively short production run before it was mercifully withdrawn from the market. Arisaka Type 99, Japanese World War II. The Arisaka Type 99 was the standard infantry rifle of the Imperial Japanese Army during World War II. The original design, a culmination of Japanese rifle development, was largely based on principles established by Colonel Nariakira Arisaka. Early production models of the Type 99 were robust, reliable, and well-made bolt-action rifles, with strong actions and often chrome-lined bores to resist corrosion. However, the escalating and desperate demands of total war, coupled with severe resource shortages, led to a decline in quality for its late war variants, transforming a once decent rifle into a truly worst weapon. As Japan's military situation deteriorated and industrial capacity dwindled under intense Allied pressure, quality control for the Type 99 plummeted. These so-called last-ditch or substitute standard rifles were churned out with alarming levels of simplification and abysmal craftsmanship. Features like dust covers, bayonet lugs, and even sling swivels were often omitted entirely. Rifles displayed minimal or no finishing, crude welding, uncheckered wooden stocks, and simplified, often fixed, peep sights that offered little precision. Many even featured wooden butt plates instead of metal ones. Inconsistent metallurgy and incredibly rough machining in critical areas like the chambers, bolts, and receivers became common. This led to serious reliability issues like sticky bolt operation, difficulty extracting spent cases, and more dangerously, an increased risk of failure. Weakened receivers could rupture, and poorly machined bolts could shear, leading to gas leaks or even bolt ejection towards the shooter's face. While many of these last-ditch Arisakas were technically capable of firing a round, their poor craftsmanship made them prone to failures, difficult to operate smoothly, less accurate, and potentially unsafe for the shooter. Apache revolver pistol, French, 19th century. Our final entry is less a conventional firearm and more a bizarre multi-tool that epitomizes the concept of worst through its sheer impracticality and danger. This is the 19th century French Apache revolver, a truly infamous piece of criminal ingenuity. Patented by Louis Dolne in Belgium around 1869, its name is associated with the Parisian street gangs known as Apaches, who were believed to have favored such a weapon. The Apache revolver's concept was to combine three distinct instruments of close-quarters violence into a single, compact, folding device: a tiny pinfire revolver, a folding knife blade, and a set of brass knuckles. While innovative in its attempt to provide multiple options for a surprise attack, the Apache was a spectacular failure at all of them. The revolver component, a rudimentary 6-shot pinfire mechanism, fired an anemic 5mm or 7mm pinfire cartridge with extremely limited ballistic performance, providing little more than a loud noise and a minor sting. It completely lacked any sights, making accurate aiming impossible beyond point-blank range. The folding knife blade, typically small and flimsy, was not securely locked into place, making it unreliable for any serious cutting or stabbing. The brass knuckles, while functional, were awkward and cumbersome to wield when the pistol or knife components were also deployed. Crucially, and perhaps most dangerously, there was no trigger guard whatsoever. This meant that the trigger was constantly exposed, making accidental discharges highly likely if the weapon was carried loaded in a pocket, bag, or even just handled carelessly. Its small size and lack of a proper grip made it difficult to hold and manage recoil, even from its weak cartridge. The Apache was a jack of all trades, master of none, sacrificing any semblance of practicality, power, or safety for the novelty of combination.